so you guys can kind of be, uh, involved in the meeting. Obviously, everybody kind of knows. It's good to see everybody. Good. See, last time, uh, Chivers, you weren't here because you missed the last meeting on peptides because uh, you were at the level of competition coaching some hockey.
It's true. I was at a hockey tournament. That is 100% correct.
Yeah. So now, so now, get this thing rolling. I see a lot of people we already know, so it's good to see everybody here. I'll just get this thing rolling. So this is Alan Burr, or you like going by AB. I feel like people call you AB. Which one you prefer?
Yeah, the last 13 years has been AB, and then that's kind of how it's been. So
So that's
Okay.
what it is. That's what it'll stay.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. He does. I don't want to make him feel awkward and be calling him Alan. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I
it's
mean, there'll be players that go, "Who's Alan?" Like they've never heard my full name. Like, so that's just AB is all they've heard. So
yeah. So
That's what
AB,
it'll stay.
give us a little background. So you're with the Pirates. Kind of tell us about like just give us for people that don't know you, just give us kind of like a brief background on what you're doing in Pittsburgh and where you came from.
yeah, so I started undergrad at East Carolina University and when I graduated in 2005. Small internship in Boston with Mike Boyle over a summer, and then went to grad school at Appalachian State for 2 years. Kind of working mainly football and kind of dabbled in like and men and women's soccer there. From there, did an internship at Georgia Tech for a summer, and then kind of took my first kind of full time job at Central Connecticut State, working mainly baseball. Helped out with football, so baseball, softball, and swimming there. Um, Made the jump to a bigger school at Florida International, working mainly baseball, softball, women's tennis there, and helping out with football there. And then transitioned to baseball only in 2000. Yeah, 2013 was my first season with the Pirates, and pretty much went through every level. Started at low A in 2013. I did 2 years in Altoona, which is our double A affiliate. Um, I did 1 year in Bradenton, which at the time, now everything's kind of switched and moved around, but at the time that was um, our high A affiliate. And then from 2017 was my first year in AAA in Indianapolis and was there until 24. And this was my first year in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and so now what do you do specifically like going into this season? Like what's your role there? Like what is your, I guess,
The
title?
title there, I was the assistant strength coach there. And I had healthy players, of course, but we needed um, one direct line of communication. So I was involved with the rehab space there as well, between like a direct line of communication between me and the physical therapists that were there. So any kind of long term rehab, even some short term rehab, depending on the situation, were kind of passed off to me, regardless of whoever had them. Like whichever strength coach had that player, were kind of passed off, and we transitioned to that. So there was kind of one line of communication there. Um, so yeah, that was kind of where we were at this year.
Okay, perfect. And so now going into this year, you're the co-director, is this right?
Yeah, as far as I think the
Got a
understanding right
promotion.
now, as far as the understanding right now, the way I think we're heading is that we'll be kind of like co-head or co-coaches. Um, I believe that's kind of the route we're taking right now, and so depending on who we hire as the other assistant, like potentially being the lead of kind of the voice of our department and moving forward in that direction. I think that's kind of the route we're going. That's still a work in progress as we kind of go through that process now. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so in other words, you're in charge of programming.
yeah, something like that right now. Like,
Yeah,
charge of
and
reaching out to all the players and kind of adapting and getting their programming situated and moving forward. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll just
And
say,
does this include Paul Skeens?
That's the kicker with baseball is that everybody tends to have their own guys, and Paul happens to be one of those.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
yeah, okay, so essentially, you're in charge of programming, right? And and obviously, like you've also have you finished the art and science of programming? I know.
I got about two sections left. Like the tail end of it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, but I'll kind of fill everyone in on this, but uh, no, we wanted to have you on for quite some time, but we know how busy you are, so this kind of worked out to be the perfect time. But now you're in charge of programming, and with that, we were kind of just briefly discussing through text message and through phone call, like point A and
Mm-hmm.
establishing a point A.
Yeah.
And as we were kind of having this conversation, I was like, hey, this is probably like a really good conversation to have with on the founders meeting, right? So that everyone's involved. So I don't have to like relay something to, let's say, like Chivers or vice versa. And we can all be on this call together to start to kind of learn about this, right? So,
Yeah.
so essentially, I don't want to talk for you, but I know you well enough to know that like when we talk about talking volume, we talk about training volume.
Yeah.
Like you want to talk about he only tells you what you need to know. It's very optimal volume of talking. So that's why I'm trying to set the plate up, right? But essentially what you were saying is, hey, you want to position yourself for success in programming. And so in order for you to do that, you have to establish point A.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
so we've been kind of having back and forth discussions on like, well, what is point A for you and where you're at? Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we
Okay.
kind of got that ball rolling when you visited in Pittsburgh, whatever it was, middle of the season, and trying to establish like what point A looks like for our department and how we're going to move forward with that. Um, Driving through and going through the course kind of solidified some things, that I needed to kind of understand and move in that direction. And then some of the training that I do in the off seasons kind of help me solidify like the guide that I want to, like where we want to go and how we want to direct it. And it helps that we the complete staff between us and the athletic trainers and the physical therapists, a bunch of, I would say probably 80% of the group has some sort of, FRS certification and has the understanding of the direction and what we're talking about. So as we kind of sit down and start mapping out moving forward and kind of what this looks like for the department. So as we do these off-season calls and we're trying to set this up, I'm kind of molding it and shaping it towards kind of that point A, right? Of what do we need and what do I feel like we need to have direct correlation to the proper programming that each of these athletes are going to need. So as we sit down, we're walking through and kind of beating up what we currently do for range of motion. Are there any additions, kind of subtractions that we need to take? So we've kind of mapped it out. We're going to continue to keep the same range of motion, shoulder, hip. We're adding in some flexion extension for the spine and like cat cow, like big toe, and molding that. We're getting straight leg hamstring, straight leg hip flexion, bent knee hip flexion, and going that route. And then, whereas previous years we've kind of established and utilized the movement screen, I felt like we never kind of went back and utilized that enough to drive programming. So as I kind of worked through all of this and what point A looks like for our department, it was I need to have a one-on-one sit down with the player and kind of walk through these point A's, these sections of point A's where, as established in baseball, we have our own medical recording system. So we have previous injury history already. So I don't really need to dive in too much with the individual within that meeting. Um, you know, this is kind of mapping out like a day one of what our spring training would look like and our assessment day. So we're going to currently get on that same day, we're getting all the range of motion. So really, I only need to dive into what goals and what constraints they have on the field that they want to get better at, and then what their training history looks like. And really, it's kind of getting rid of the kind of movement screen and those assessments that we would tend to do on that first day, and really kind of hone in on the one-on-one conversation. And kind of where I got to that was that, I'll train some kids in the off season and kind of started with that process. And in terms of goals and directions of where I need to program, like it's so much easier to kind of understand and follow of like, all right, this is what the hip was doing. We need to work on this. So we're going to start there. This guy hasn't touched absolute at all. So I need to kind of start here, but this is what he wants to get on. Like, a lot of these younger kids, it's all about exit velocity and I want to throw harder, but the shoulder doesn't move right. Whatever he's got, poor link tension relationship. So we need to work on that first. So it kind of all meshes and molds together and gives me a clear direction on the 2 days they're going to train with me. And also any other days they're going to, I'm going to send them home with homework. And so I kind of mapped that out and kind of presented that to the group. So that's kind of the route we're moving forward with. Like, I never really used the movement screen to program off of. I never really looked back at any of the movement screen numbers because it really didn't give me any answers and direction to where we need to go to. And, our minor league department is ran pretty well. And that was kind of their route they did the last 2 or 3 years of like, how's your all season going? Like, and had meetings. So it was a kind of a clear, easier transition to go that route for us, at the major league level of having that sit down meeting and not necessarily go through, the same sort of information, but get clearer picture of, what their training history and what their goals are. And then we can map out and it gives me a clearer picture. And then I can go back, look at the range of motion and, we can move forward a lot easier, for at least spring training. And, the rest of the spring training is, your technology assessments, the force jumps and things of that nature. And, we can kind of mesh everything together and have a clear picture. And then the player has a clear understanding of, I feel like it would give more buy-in, but like, all right, this is what we need to work on. And they're now able to see that within the programming moving forward. Like, all right, this is what your goal is on the field, and this is what we're going to do. We need to normalize these joints, and it gives them a clear picture, and they can kind of see that as with the programming.
Okay, perfect. I just kind of want to go through that, and then Chivers, I'll let you say anything. So you're saying that you're doing joint function for point A. You got ranges of motion in the shoulder, for the shoulder, the hip, and the spine.
Correct.
Right. So that's essentially one element of point B, which is joint function. You're doing range of motion, but you also mentioned length tension relationships. So you're also getting some reactive strength stuff on assessment. Is that true?
So that's kind of where we're headed, right? Like, so Nick Presley, who's is a founder's member as well, has put a lot of work into it and has been kind of pushing that narrative forward of we need more information, right? Like, we're getting numbers. And what I found out, especially when you were in Pittsburgh, of like it's not necessarily the numbers that we really need to look at, right? Because, the one player that I think we'll end up getting into is he may have had 10 degrees of internal range of motion, but he had a functioning joint. Whereas in years past, we're going to look at that 10 degrees and go, oh, he needs more range of motion. But the link tension relationship was fine. There's no pinching, there's no closing ankle pain. Like he's still able to do his job on the field. We just need to get rid of this neurological tightness that he has because he actually has a functioning joint. So like him especially, Nick especially was driving that narrative of we need more information on the back end. So we've kind of along that same lines, we've kind of cleared out some more time for them to get range of motion and get the numbers that we all kind of look at, and also allow time to get more findings on the back end of that range of motion and give us more information to program off of.
Shivers, say something because you're the one that, in regards to range of motion and stuff like that, and these findings, right? So kind of add in on. So what? Because essentially, let me word it this way, because what AB is saying is 100% makes 100% sense. So what he's saying is, from his perspective, for somebody that has to program in the strength setting, but he also has guys that aren't at point B, it's not good enough for you to just give him range of motion of the shoulder joint. He also needs to know, like, is this joint functional? Is it not functional? What's the length tension relationship? Is there neurological tightness? He wants the nuanced notes. Why is that? Because he's programming based off of that nuance. In other words, he was only getting the numbers, right? But those
Right.
numbers by themselves don't tell the story. So do you kind of want to go through that?
Me?
Yeah. You're the one that teaches it. Like just the just the different nuanced behaviors. Like,
Well, I think before that, I think what's important, I think what should be important to kind of hash out first, because I wrote it down here, um, is in a setting like this. But I think that's the setting anywhere, whether you're like in your own private world or you're in a professional organization. And you kind of glanced over at AB, but I think it's important is that the level of competition constrains everything. So that's the first point to make, is that like you have to capture point A with respect to things that have occurred in the sporting environment and things that maybe the athlete wants to be doing in the sporting environment, because that otherwise you're just gathering information. And I think that's probably why initially you had difficulty trying to figure out if an athlete wants this, and I put them through a particular movement screen, whatever that screen is, it doesn't really matter. There's not an intermingling of that information. So essentially what you have is you have two pieces of information that's grouped accordingly, but it's siloed information. So it doesn't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think more importantly now, before we get into the details of some of that other stuff, is that in the setting of high performance, you have to understand what the goals of the athlete are, or maybe what the organizational goals of the athlete are, because that provides the lens through which the information is gathered. And that's what gives the information signal for you to say, oh, I get it. So this means this, and that means this. And this 10 degrees that we thought might be important is not actually that important, because there's other things that are more important, and this is actually a functioning joint. So I think that's the first thing to kind of point out first and foremost. I also think that highlights maybe the case that you guys are going to talk about, but I don't want to give any information away. I think the second thing that is important to understand is, like, what is point A? I mean, we've talked about it before, but like, what is point A? Point A is really just understanding your athlete, where they've been, how long they've been there,